have Anne Osborne. She is one of the pioneers, I would say, of our generation right now coming into a vegan, a fruit-based, raw lifestyle. So we wanted to jump her on here today to talk about how she got into this journey, her inspiration, the struggles she might have had, and just being this beautiful ray of light here in the world. So thank you, Anne, for being with all of us today. We're so excited to have you. I know we talked about a couple of years ago, and so it's great to have you on here again and just to hear your wisdom and just to share the knowledge that you have.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I do like the whole Lent theme. I've done many mono diets for Lent, not this year, but
Ah,
a couple of years ago I did orange juice for 40 days. So yeah, I do really like the Lent and the thing of, not so much giving up something, but doing something that improves your health and your wellness for that period of time, I think, and you can do that without feeling it's, sort of sackcloth and ashes, but it can be a really rewarding experience. Yeah, so I started off on my vegan diet when I was 19, so that's 40 years ago. I was vegetarian and I really knew that I should be vegan. For me personally, I could no longer eat dairy products and eggs, knowing what was behind it. So for me, it was time to give it up. So my best
mhm.
friend at university, we did it together overnight. That was it. And I'd never given it up for a health thing. I was only sort of like 19. I thought I was in, good health. And
Mhm.
the very next day, I had an experience which made me realize that although veganism was primarily ethics for me, it's also a health thing. So I was at university at the time in Canterbury, in Kent, in the UK, and the campus was at the top of a hill. And my student digs were at the bottom of the hill. So every morning when I was going to uni, I'd be walking up this hill. And every single morning, by the time I got to the top of the hill, I would be tight in my chest and wheezy. But the very next day, I gave up all animal products. I was at the top of the hill and it suddenly hit me. I'm not tight in my chest. I'm not wheezing. And I never have done since. And it was so soon after giving up dairy products and eggs that I was like, wow, it was like a revelation to me. What we eat affects how we feel and our health. And I'd never even thought of it before because I was fortunate to have relatively good health, or so I thought. But the improvement with becoming vegan, and veganism is always about the ethics for me, but that sort of byproduct of it in a way, which was health. So because I'd realized the connection between what we eat and how we feel, I thought I want to find out more about different types of vegan diet and how they make me feel. And I was very, very interested about it. So I read books, I studied things. I first of all started off on a macrobiotic vegan diet. And I felt
Mm.
pretty good on it because I cooked everything from scratch. It was all organic ingredients. But there was so much cooking. It was like 4 hours a day cooking because every meal was cooked because I wasn't living in the tropics. So with macrobiotics, if you're not living in the tropics, you have sort of grains and vegetables basically. That's a vegan diet. And in the end, I think it was just all the cooking and everything, even though I felt fairly good on it. And I just, no, it's too much all the preparation, all the cooking. And I tried a general whole food vegan diet. I even tried the Anne Wigmore, lots of sprouts and wheatgrass. And again, for me, it was so much preparation. And then when I'd been a vegan for like about 4 or 5 years, I went to a talk in my hometown. I finished uni, I was back in my hometown of Leicester, also in the UK. And there was a local guy who was a fruitarian, and his name was David Shelley. And I was
Mm.
part of a local animal rights group. So we had regular meetings, and sometimes at the meetings, we would have a speaker. So at one of these meetings, David Shelley, the fruitarian, was a speaker, and we were all ethical vegans. And he was just came in, he had so much energy, he had this wonderful tan, he rode his bike everywhere, he had a book which I read, and I thought, wow, I want to try this. And about 4 or 5 of my friends as well, we all started off. Now, I was in the early stages of my first pregnancy, so I thought I don't want to go fruitarian overnight, even though I'd been gradually refining my diet, cutting out white flour, white sugar, more processed foods. So I did this gradual transition over about a year to 14 months, more and more fruit, less and less cooked vegan food. And
While you
to
were pregnant too, right? So that was while
yes,
you were pregnant.
yeah. So I was doing this transition. So it was mostly fruit. Some days I would have like all fruit. Other times I would have a cooked sweet potato or a cooked like white potato. But it wasn't a lot of processed food. And I think because I did it gradually, I didn't really get any elimination or any sort of like feelings that I didn't feel well while I was doing it. Because
Mm-hmm.
obviously it had been building up since I became vegan. I've been gradually working towards a more healthy diet. And so that was it, once I transitioned. And one thing I really loved was the simplicity. After doing macrobiotic vegan diet, where you're cooking for 4 hours and you're preparing food and cleaning up and that, so we formed an organic fruit farm group. So we had boxes of organic fruit, and then each week one person would have the delivery at their house, and then other people would come and take what they needed. And so it was just so simple. We had beautiful quality, and I think that was very important. It was really high quality organic fruit from all over the world, because in the UK, local produce is more limited than in a tropical or subtropical environment. And I think having the support of like 5 or 6 of us, and also having this really good quality fruit, it was a very good foundation for doing the diet. And it was so simple. You just have your fruit in a box, you eat it, and that's it.
Yeah.
There's no 4 hours a
Yeah.
day of cooking and cleaning up and all that other thing. And that was one of the things that really, it still appeals to me about fruit diet, how simple it is and how much time you have for other things. But also, it was the best diet I've ever had for my health. So it wasn't just the environment side of it. It wasn't just the convenience side of it. It wasn't just the ethics. It was just feeling very good on it. So yeah, and I
Yeah.
can't think of another food that I could eat that would be healthier. So yeah, that's why I'm still on a fruitarian diet. Yeah.
What an amazing story, and I can so relate to how easy it is. It's like the ultimate fast food. You know what I mean? Like people are like, I don't have time, and they're like, even when you ask them like, go on this diet, and they're like, I don't have time. I'm like, you don't have time to peel a banana? Like it's so
Yeah.
easy. And I was the same way when I went vegan. It was like
Yeah.
all the cooking, all the preparation. I'm like,
Yeah.
we just do something really easy here? Can we just eat fruit? It
Yeah.
makes so much sense. And you're thriving. I mean, how many years have you been on this lifestyle?
So I was 24 when I entered the transition. So yeah, about 34, 35 years now. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. So you are just like the
Yeah.
walking example, especially for all the people who say anybody who goes on this lifestyle, they're gonna just shrink away and they're not healthy and eventually they're gonna have to go back to eating meat. What do you
Yes.
think of
Yeah.
people like that say share that with you?
Well, I think one thing you can do is get blood tests if you want to get blood tests that show that you're healthy, that show that your liver functions fine, because that's one other thing people will say. You'll get a fatty liver, like an alcoholic, because it's too much fructose. But
Mm,
it's not refined like high fructose corn syrup. It's in a
right.
fruit. And there's fiber there, there's phytonutrients in there, and they all have a very different effect than if you're eating refined sugars. I really, really believe that. I read a book when I was about 20 called Sugar Blues by William Dufty. And after that, I never ate processed sugar again. It just blew my mind about how not good sugar, refined sugar is. But the sugar in fruit is a whole different thing. I've had recent blood tests. My liver's fine. I don't have any signs of fatty liver. So people say, "Oh, what about your liver? What about your liver?" But I've never,
Yeah.
in blood tests I've had in the past, I've never had any, issues with the enzymes or whatever the tests are that show that you might have a fatty liver. So yeah, and I think what's important in any diet, whether you're a carnivore, whether you're an omnivore, whether you're a vegetarian, whether you're a pescatarian, whether you're a fruitarian, is that you get your nutritional needs met. It doesn't
Mm,
matter what diet you're on. And I really think if you eat a fruit or a fruit-based diet, you need good quality fruit. You need fruit that's full of minerals because yes, we can get enough of our macronutrients from fruit quite easily. If we eat enough fruit, we can get enough carbs, enough fat, and enough protein. But for me, it's the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals. And if
mm,
you're not eating good quality fruit, then I think you could possibly be malnourished on a fruitarian diet. And one example, and what I always push for, is organic or non-sprayed or naturally grown fruit. Because one thing is if you're eating fruit that's grown, from trees or fruit plants in soil that's been treated with chemicals, it kills the mycelium or the fungi in the soil. And the fungi in the mycelium have a really special relationship with the trees. They have this wonderful symbiotic relationship. So the
Mm,
fungi can't photosynthesize, they don't have leaves. So the tree passes sugars, carbohydrates to the fungi for food. And in return, the fungi break down inorganic bonds in like calcium phosphate so that the
mm,
tree absorb the calcium. Now, if you put any kind of chemicals on the soil, harsh chemicals, you kill the fungi. They don't like chemicals. They're sensible, they don't like chemicals. And so what happens is you can put all the calcium carbonate you want, all the lime in your soil, and you won't get any calcium that the trees can assimilate because they
right.
need the fungi to break down the bonds. So this is one thing I think is so important to eat non-sprayed, naturally grown, organic, biodynamic fruit because it will have more calcium in it. It will have more
Mm,
magnesium in it. It will have more copper in it. All these things that are in the soil that need the fungi to make them available to the tree so the trees can absorb them and assimilate them. So it's
mm,
the quality of anything. So whatever diet you're on, I really believe you need to eat quality produce because otherwise you're not going to get the minerals you need. It's easy to get the macros. Even I like protein. It's easy to get enough protein on a raw
yeah.
diet, but it's the micronutrients I think we have to be aware of. And when we're
Yeah.
eating our own fruit that we've grown or a neighbour's fruit or forage fruit, but you have to be careful. You don't pick anything poisonous when you forage fruit because it ain't edible for humans. But if you know what you're doing, get a good book. Foraging wild fruit is so high in
Mm,
antioxidants,
mm,
and really, and maybe we can't eat 100% organic. We have to do the best we can. But if we can do a bit of foraging, a bit of growing our own, a bit of getting to know neighbours with fruit trees, then we can supplement our diet with these really sort of high nutritional fruits that have
right.
minerals and antioxidants in them. So yeah, I think, and people sometimes say, I can't afford organic. I
Yes, I was
can't
just gonna ask that.
I can't afford organic. I can't access organic. Now, if you say that to yourself, you're programming yourself that you're not going to find organic fruit. You're not. I have been in a position where I was on a very, very low wage as a single parent, and I still ate maybe 70 to 80% organic food for me and my son. So when people say I can't afford it, I've been on a very, very low wage. But I invested time in forming a buying group, in going to different shops and different stores where they had organic fruit at a lower price, going to markets. It is a bit more work, but I think for your health, it's definitely worth it. And also tell yourself, I can access organic fruit. I will be able to afford organic fruit. Because if you say you can't, you're programming your brain. And everything starts with a thought. Everything we do starts with a thought. So if your thought is, I can't afford it, I can't find it, then maybe you won't be able to. So I think have a very positive attitude. And I know I've been there. I've been on a very low wage and still found great quality organic fruit. It's a
Yeah.
mindset, a lot of it, and the hard work of the legwork of going around to get it. But I
Yeah,
think it's
absolutely.
possible.
And what about people in colder temperatures, the ones that are like in Germany and in Europe right now where it's freezing or in the middle of the US, they're like there's just no fruit available, you know? Do you believe in like frozen fruits? Do you believe in, if they have to having some of that non-organic or having it shipped in? What do you suggest for people like that? Because that's like one of the number one things I hear is like it's winter time and I'm cold.
Mm. For the first 12 years of my fruit diet, my camera's playing about a bit. I don't know, it's going to be psychedelic. But for the
I
first
know. I was wondering what's going on.
I don't know whether to unplug it and plug it back in. I might do that. I'll try unplugging it and plugging it back in. Mm.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Oh, I think I'm back.
Are you back? I love
I'm
that
back.
photo of you too. It's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah,
You
where
were
was I?
talking about if people are in cold weathers,
Yes,
what
yeah,
to
sorry.
do with like they can't find
Yeah.
fruit, all that.
Yes, so I think the first 12 years I was on a fruit diet, I lived in the UK and we had some cold winters and it can be challenging. I think one thing I found effective was to do more exercise because exercise warms you up. I'd go running in like
Mm,
0 degrees and lower, and that would really help. It'd set me up for the day. So I think exercise, and if you're inside, do something like, some weightlifting exercise or some aerobic exercise. Dance. Dancing is such a good and fun exercise. Put some music on that you really like and just dance. Nobody's watching you. You just dance and just have a good time. So I think that helped. More exercise. Also, I would store fruit. So one thing that stores very well are apples, and you can research which apple varieties store well. So if you get apples, you can get organic apples, and to store them, they don't have to have any bruises or any blemishes on them,
mm,
because then the rot will come in and it will spread to all the box. But if you get apples with no bruises, no blemishes, wrap them in newspaper, each one
huh,
individually, put them in a box. They will store some for 2 or 3 months. Put them in a cool, dry place. And I've
really?
done, yes, yeah. But some varieties store better, so you can just Google which apple varieties store well, and yeah, you can take late season apples, the varieties that store well, and you can store them into the spring for sure.
That is
So yeah,
what a great hack. That's such a good hack.
yeah,
I didn't even know that hack. Yeah, we're sharing that hack with people.
yes, yeah. And another thing is that you can form an organic buying group. So when I was in the UK, year round, we had an organic buying group. We found a wholesaler. We got whole boxes of fruit from all over the world. And I still remember that was some of the best fruit I ever had. We had these
Mm,
wonderful apricots from Italy, and I've never had better apricots, even off the tree. And we had wonderful mangoes from Egypt, sweet
mm.
grenadilla from Burkina
Ah,
Faso. And the prices were reasonable because we were buying in bulk. And that really, really helped. So all year round, we were getting good quality organic fruit. So I would definitely suggest, if you know some other people, get together, look at local organic wholesalers, because there are some, like, I know Orcos is finished now, but there are some other European organizations that ship tropical fruit, but often they're quite expensive. So if you kind of cut out that middleman and you liaise with a local organic wholesaler and form a buying group, that can be very helpful.
yeah.
So yeah, I think as well, if you want something, you can do it. I've done 12 years in English winters, and I think one thing that you have to watch is vitamin D, because vitamin D, I think when I lived in colder climates, I'd always get this thing for like, I want to go somewhere else. And looking back on it, I think it was the vitamin D rather than the abundance of fruit, which was also nice if you go somewhere else in the winter for a couple of months. Because when I lived in the southwest of the UK, in Penzance, which is the sunniest place in the UK, I didn't have any yearnings to go somewhere else during the winter. And I was
Mm,
there for a winter because I got a lot of sun. So I think one of the things to watch is your vitamin D and get your levels checked. And I'm lucky. I live in a sunny location, but
right.
sometimes, even if people have a suntan, even if they go out in the sun a lot, they're still deficient in vitamin D, because
Mm,
vitamin D can take up to 48 hours to assimilate. So you get the sun, you go out on a Monday, you get the sun on your skin. It can sometimes take till Wednesday to be fully absorbed. Now, if you have a
mm.
hot shower, if you use soap on your body, you're going to wash it off. So you can have a very good tan and still be vitamin D deficient. And there was a study that was done between, yeah, there was a study that was done between Bushmen in Africa and surfers in Hawaii, and they both had a similar amount of exposure to the sun. Now, you would expect the surfers in Hawaii who had whiter skins to have more vitamin D, because if you have a very black skin, you will absorb about a 20th of the vitamin D than if you have a light skin, because your
Mm,
origins in a hot country where you didn't need all that vitamin D because you were getting it all the time. So you had a dark skin to stop you
right.
getting too much. And that's why we get a tan. When we get a tan, it should be that we've had enough sun, we've had enough vitamin D, so we put in a darker skin so we absorb less. But if you're washing that off, you can still have a tan and not have enough vitamin D. So in this study, they found that the surfers had much lower vitamin D levels than the Bushmen in Africa. And the reason was because they were washing and using soap. So even though they should have had more because of the lighter skin, absorbing more vitamin D, they actually had less. So that's a very important vitamin for anybody that's on a vegan diet, on a fruitarian diet, on a raw vegan diet. You do
Yeah.
need to ensure your vitamin D levels are high. And I had
Right.
recent blood tests, and my doctor
Yeah, I
said,
want to hear those. I'd love to hear that. Yeah.
yeah. So he said, your vitamin D levels are very high. Stop supplementing. And I said, I've never supplemented vitamin D because when I lived in England, I didn't really know about vitamin D so much. And he said, stop supplementing. And I said, I'm not supplementing. He said, oh, you must eat lots of dairy then. I said, I don't eat any dairy. So you can get enough vitamin D from the sun, but you don't want to be washing. Maybe wash the parts that need to be washed with soap and hot water. And if you can, go for a couple of days. If you get a really good amount of sun, go for a couple of days without using soap all over your body or hot water. So
Mm.
to ensure you get your vitamin D levels, and I would say like to people, get your vitamin D levels checked just to make sure they're okay, because it's such an important, it's almost like a steroid rather than a vitamin. It's so
Mm.
important. Protection against many kinds of cancer, protection against inflammation, protection against viral illnesses. So yeah,
Well,
that's an
it's interesting because you say cancer, and they tell people that if they have skin cancer, not to go out in the sun.
yeah.
So
But that
what do you think about that then? Because then you're saying get vitamin D and don't wash it off, which will probably help you, right, with cancer.
Yeah, but even the British Cancer Council are now telling people to go out in the sun without sunscreen for 10 to 15 minutes a day in the middle of the day because so many people in the UK are vitamin D deficient. Another thing is, there was an interesting book I read about the heat called The Healing Sun by, I forget who the author was now, but in it they said diet is very important. If you eat a low fat, diet, a healthy diet with fresh produce, you're much less likely to get issues with skin cancer than if you eat a high fat diet. And the person in the book said, if you're eating a high fat processed diet, I wouldn't recommend you going out much in the sun. I think that's a huge difference. And a lot of people that go raw find that they don't burn in the sun like they used to. You've still got to be careful with the sun. I'm in Australia. The sun is very, very hot in the middle of the day in summer. You don't go out unless you're covered up. Do your work early in the morning or in the afternoon. In the winter, yes, it's fine. But I would also suggest looking at the UV index of where you are. I do. And if it's going to be 14, I'm not going to be out in the sun because the sun is strong, powerful and needs to be respected. But at the same time, it's the source of all life, and we need it for vitamin D unless we're supplementing or using a sun lamp. So,
Mm,
yeah, cancer is caused by an imbalance in our diet, in our lifestyle, or some very rarely genetic reasons. But I think it's always the body working in our best interest. And even if you have cancer, it's the body trying to deal with your health challenge. The body, I believe, never works against you. And it might seem like it, but the body's always trying to do its best with the current circumstances. So if you're smoking, if you're drinking, if you're eating processed foods and you get cancer, to me, the cancer isn't an enemy. It's the body's still trying to help you. It's still on your
mm,
side. And whatever it's doing because it's in a bit of a predicament. So,
right.
yeah, I would suggest be respectful of the sun. If you live somewhere where the UV's high, cover up or keep out of the sun, go into the sun early morning or in the afternoon. But we do need the sun. We do need it.
Mm,
And it's not just for vitamin D, it's for all kind of reactions in our body. Morning sun is very important as well. When they used to heal people who had TB, children had TB, not just of the lungs, of the spine. And before antibiotics, there was no treatment, but there used to be solarium clinics in Scandinavia, and they used to put the children out in the early morning sun. They had little hospital beds. They'd wheel them out in the sun. They would have their lessons in the sun, and they healed. Severe cases of TB of the lungs, of the spine, healed purely with sun treatment, the early morning sun. And
mm,
also, even if we're living somewhere that's pretty cloudy or overcast, if you get out around about sunrise or as soon after sunrise as you can, and as soon before sunrise as you can, that helps your body know that it's day, and it helps your diurnal cycle, and it really helps with hormones, serotonin, melatonin. If you get out round about sunrise and get out as well, even if it's for 5 or 10 minutes just around sunset, and that's very helpful. That's not the vitamin D so much because it's too early and too late for vitamin D production, but that's for our well-being and our hormones and everything. So yeah, the sun's amazing, but we have to respect it. And if we live somewhere like Australia, you can't just go out into the sun forever. You know, you are going to damage your skin. You've got to be careful. Yeah.
Right, right. It's kind of the same here in Hawaii. You're out way too long and you're like, okay. Like as you're talking about the sun is just blazing on my body right now. But those are such good reminders and advices because a lot of people have such a different understanding of the sun. And I love what you said about going out to the sun first thing in the morning and being with the sunrise. It's almost like welcoming our day with the sun, with the Father, with the light, and allowing that life to come back into us and knowing that it's that new day and that fresh start. So that is such good advice. And I love what you were talking about. You said it briefly about how you've practiced different times in Lent, because we are talking about Lent right now. And the people here that are on this, they're either, they went vegan, they're abstaining from animal products, but they either went vegan, or if they're already vegan, they're going raw. If they're already raw, maybe doing some fastings, right? Can you
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about your Lent fastings and how that was for you?
Yeah, I've always liked Lent as a period of kind of reflection, of doing something that's not just physical, but I think it has spiritual effects as well. So often for Lent, I've done mono diets, and then often I've carried them on after Lent because I've been enjoying it so much. So I've done melons a few times, just having
Mm,
different types of melon for Lent. In Australia, where I'm in the tropics, we don't get so much variety of melons. So oranges, I usually do orange juice for Lent. And 2 years ago, that was the last time I did 40 days on orange juice. And it was
mm,
fantastic. And I think as well, it frees up, if you do a mono diet, it frees up energy for other things because a lot of our time is what we're going to eat. Even when we're on a raw fruit diet, what am I going to eat? What am I going to have for breakfast? What am I going to have for my midday meal? What am I going to have for my dinner? And when you just have one type of fruit, it's so free. And I think it frees you up. If you've got something, often I've done outside of Lent, I've done mono diets. If something's going on emotionally, if I'm having some challenges emotionally, doing a mono diet, again, it frees up headspace. You buy your boxes of oranges or your boxes of melons or grapes or whatever you're going to have for your mono diet, and you don't have to think about food, and it gives you time to reflect and heal in a way. So as well as doing some healing physically from doing a mono diet, some elimination, also I think it's mentally, it frees up
mm.
time in your head because you're not thinking about food. You've got your food sorted. You don't have to have that kind of energy thinking about food. So
Right.
yeah,
Wow. And do you have some I mean, has there been pretty big realizations or revelations that happen during those Lent periods when you are just mono fasting?
yeah, I think especially with oranges, I find that oranges are quite aggressive in a way for sort of elimination. But I think also from a spiritual point of view, you find what's really important in life. When you simplify your life, you kind of
Mm,
find what's important, and all the material things don't hold such a sway. Everyone's saying you've got to have the latest computer or the latest iPhone, or you've got to have the flash car, or you've got to have this computer. But I think when you simplify your life and you feel happy and healthy, you just realize that those things aren't really important and you don't put so much store in them. And I think as well, there's always a connection with nature. I think when we're
mm,
on a more natural diet and lifestyle, we connect with the trees, we connect with the plants. It's not just animals as well. There's so much pleasure in just being in nature. What many people
mm.
think, oh, boring, you just walk in the country. But I think when you feel in tune, it's just the most entertainment you could have. Like often in the evening when the sun comes down, I watch the sunset, and we live on a gorge, so we'll see the sun go over the gorge, and the little wallabies come out to feed, and just sitting there watching the wallabies feed, watching the sun go down. I think I'd rather do this than go to any sort of like fancy nightclub or fancy dinner or anything like that. I think there's the pleasures in just simple nature are
Mm.
astounding. We just see that much beauty, and I don't know, we seem to suck it in somehow. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
I,
amazing. I know
I think there's that just connection with the universe more. I don't know
yeah,
how it works, whether our energy just is different and we just connect, or we just take pleasure in just small things in nature that maybe we'd overlook if we were, I don't know, on a different type of diet or lifestyle.
absolutely. Absolutely. I did my first like long mono fasting during Lent a few years ago, and I did oranges as well. And it was, like you said, it was one of the most profound things after the 40 days. I'm like, I'm going 60 more, because it was just that
Mm,
energy and that vibration of just ingesting just an orange and like what the orange carries, that medicine that it carries for you. And I love what you said, how it's really good on the digestion, but then also just like that simplicity back to
mm,
nature, back to
mm.
nature, and how we can become closer to nature and then closer to ourselves, closer to the creator,
Yes.
through just
Yeah.
simplifying your life and simplifying your digestion.
Yeah, and I also think that 40 days in many religions, it's a significant amount of time, 40 days. And I think it's, a lot of people fast for 40 days or they'll do something else for 40 days. And I think it's kind of, I don't know in numerology or anything, but I do think it seems a significant amount of time, a nice time to do water fast, even some people do 40 days water fast or a mono diet or whatever. I do think
Right.
it's kind of significant. And I think something else is when you finish a mono diet, you have renewed appreciation for your previous diet. So for fruit, so I love my mono diet. I really enjoy it. I tune into that fruit. But when I finish, I think, wow, there's so much else out there. And I think
Yeah.
that's the thing. If anyone becomes jaded with a raw vegan diet or a fruitarian diet, do a mono diet. You can do it for 3 or 4 days. And when you finish, instead of saying, oh, I can't have that, I can't have that anymore, I can't have this, you go, I
Yes.
can have this, there's so much more that you can have. And I think a reappreciation of the abundance of the world is just
Mm.
enhanced, after doing a mono diet. I think that's another nice aspect of a mono diet is that reappreciation for what we can have afterwards.
What a great perspective. I love that. I wanted to jump in a little bit more now to, I know we talked about this briefly the last call we had, and we were talking about births and pregnancies. As you know, I had two now. Since I talked to you, I've had a second.
Oh,
And and it was, I remember listening to, or remember, our last interview, and you were sharing with me how different even the second one was to the
mm,
first one. Maybe you can share a little bit about that. I would love to hear kind of like that differences, because I know you weren't fully
yeah.
transitioned the first one, and then the second one you were like 12 years later. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So my first pregnancy was when I was in transition to a fruit diet. So I was also having some vegan food, not
Mm,
highly processed food, but still cooked food. And I found after I gave birth, my sort of stomach took a long time to go back to what it was.
mm,
And even people would say, "Oh, are you pregnant again?" And I thought, "No, oh, no, I've still got a bit of a belly." And
yeah.
so when I had my second child, I was 12 and a half years older. I thought, oh, it's going to be even worse. I'm going to have this belly for a bit. Anyway, so I said to my partner at the time, I said, oh, expect that I might have a bit of a belly for, a few months. And the next day, my stomach was flat and I'd lost all the weight that I put on in pregnancy. And I was like, oh, wow, because I wasn't expecting it. And I was 12 and a half years older, so you'd expect everything's a
Yeah.
bit older, it's going to take longer to go back. But it was like, both pregnancies were beautiful. I love both pregnancies. I worked till, 7 months pregnant with my elder son and 8 months pregnant with my younger son. I had lots of energy. I didn't have any preeclampsia. I didn't have any swelling. I didn't have any backache. I just felt ramped up on the hormones. Because as you'll know, when
Yeah.
you're a good pregnancy, you're like, whoa, because all your hormones are like really high and everything's like, whoa. So I loved both my pregnancies, both births. My second birth was slightly better because with both I wanted to have a home birth. With my first, it was on the National Health Service in England, so they weren't very keen on it. And when I had a long second stage, they said, right, you've got to go into hospital now, even though everything was fine, even though I didn't really need to go in. So with my second pregnancy, which was in Australia, I thought, well, I'm going to get a private midwife, and she was lovely. I do have long second stages, but she just let me go. So I had a water birth at home, and I just recovered so much quicker. And it was so nice just to be at home after I'd given birth. So great
And how was
pregnancies.
it? Was it Was it painful? Like, how was the actual birth itself? Did you feel a lot of pain, or was it just a little bit easier?
No, I felt pain with both of them. I didn't take any medications with both. I did breathing. I did breathing. I'd look at something that had segments in it, like a
Mm,
lampshade with both, and I would just do the breathing. I'd do a breath for each section, and I knew by the time I got to the end, the contraction would have gone off. So yes, there was pain, but it was manageable, and it was very intense pain. I think possibly if we were all fifth or sixth generation fruitarians, we'd probably have painless births like most of the animals. But I
mm.
think, it's like the Pottinger's cats. It took like 3 generations to rectify 2 generations of cooked food. So with the dental arches, with the ribs, the Guy Claude burger in France, I think they saw third
Yeah.
generation raw children. They started to notice an improved dental arch, an improved rib cage, but it was only the third
Really?
generation. Yeah, the third generation of raw kids. So the grandkids of him and his wife, they started to notice improvements, but it took those, couple of generations. Yeah.
Wow. So what did
So
they all notice by the third generation? What did they see like the
they
biggest difference?
noticed that there was a better dental arch. So they had a
Okay, a
wider
dental
dental
arch.
arch, wider rib cages. Yeah. So
Ah,
that's very interesting.
that is.
But yeah, so I think if we had continuation of raw people, I think 3 or 4 generations we'd start to notice no B12 deficiencies. I think we'd start to notice no dental issues, and we'd have wider rib cages. But it's like the
Hmm,
Pottinger's cats. You give them cooked food, 2 generations, they start to have defects. And it takes
interesting.
3 generations to get them back to being healthy. So
Wow.
yeah. But
Wow.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, who knows what's going to come? Like if, my children have and they stay
yes,
on this lifestyle,
yes,
what it's going to look like. I was fortunate enough, both my raw pregnancies were pretty painless. Like they were, my first
mm,
one was so quick, he just like flew out of me. And then
no,
my second one, it was 15 minutes long. I literally my water broke and he just like came out. So I didn't even have time to like go into process,
yeah,
going into the
yeah,
contractions because it just came,
yeah,
right? But then my
mm,
second one, he gave me about 30 more minutes, so I definitely
wow,
felt that opening and that surge of
mm,
like energy, like, ooh, okay, it's coming, but it still
yes,
wasn't anything. It wasn't anything like my
yeah,
first pregnancy and birth when I had meat products and I was
mm,
cooked. It was so
mm,
incredibly
mm,
painful. Like
yeah,
my other ones were like, "Pff, this
yeah,
is a cakewalk." I thought what was
yeah,
more painful was actually mastitis. I don't know if you ever had mastitis or know anybody with mastitis,
mm,
but I had that a couple of times and I was like,
mm,
holy moly, this is way more painful than any type of birth at
yeah,
all. It's
yeah,
just like
yeah,
which is really an interesting thing in itself. But
mm.
I
I
love what
mean,
you're saying. What were you gonna say?
I think there's genetic factors. So I think people on like first generation raw fooders will have different experiences with birth. I think some will not have the pain, others will have the pain. But I think if I had a daughter and I didn't haven't had any daughters, but if I had a daughter who remained raw, I'd hope that she would have less pain, and then her if she had a daughter. And I think that generational thing, because we've had generations and generations of eating not very, not the food that we're designed to eat. And I think the past 100 years,
Hmm.
before that, there wasn't so much processed food. But now the amount of ultra processed food, I think, is having such a negative effect on people's health, especially children. And I think children often have more health issues than their parents because maybe their parents didn't have as much processed food. Maybe they didn't have all
Mhm.
these additives, these colorants, you look at ingredients on some products and there's no food in there. It's all additives or very, very refined starches or oxidized fats. And when you start to process anything, you're losing the nutrition in it. I mean, even if
Mm.
you cut up fruit, you will lose some antioxidants than if you just eat it whole. I mean, it's not as extreme, but what I'm trying to say, the more food is processed, the more nutrition is lost. And I think there's a few books that people have written. I think Dr. Greg has written one about ultra processed food, and then there's another doctor. I've got a couple of books on ultra processed food, and it's really, really scary about what
Hmm.
we're feeding our children and the coming generations. And in this other book about ultra-processed food, there was a very interesting experiment, not very ethical. It wouldn't be done today, but it was in a children's home, and they got children to come into this place who were malnourished, poor families. So they took the children, put them in this like home, and they gave them all unprocessed foods. So I don't
Mm.
think it even be cheese. There might have been milk, carrots,
Right.
potatoes. If things were cooked, they were very lightly cooked, but nothing was processed. And all these malnourished children could eat whatever they wanted and however much they wanted. And the children ate what they needed. Like there was a child that was deficient in scurvy, so they might have eaten some oranges. There was another child that was deficient in beta carotene, just ate carrots and carrots, ate only carrots for 2 or 3 days, then stopped. And when they looked at the nutritional profiles of these children, they'd improved. So what they were lacking, they'd known themselves what to eat. And while it's like a very unethical experiment, taking children off their poor parents, the results of it are very interesting that children, when given unprocessed foods, will eat what they need to rectify any nutritional imbalances. So there's that instinctive thing on what the food that is given to children today is so processed. Processed food is addictive, it has excitotoxins in. And so these children are addicted to these really, really harmful foods. They're not nurturing the child, they're not giving the child the nutrition they need. And it just showed that if children were left, if they weren't given
Mm.
any of these processed, if they didn't have access to any processed food, then kids naturally will eat the foods they need to heal, but they're sort of
Mm.
like corrupted in this because so many processed foods for children. And it's really, really sad that we're going to have, I think, issues unless people take control of their health and their children's health. We're going to have a lot of health issues coming up with the coming generations because of the way the food marketing is, the processing of food that's advertised to children. And it's convenient for parents to give them these foods, and then the children get addicted to the foods. So then the parent says, well, what do you want? And they're going to say, well, I want these chips, or I want these cookies or these biscuits, because they're
Right.
addicted to them. And it's very sad because children naturally have that instinct, which is amazing to me that the children devoid of processed food, no access to it, will naturally pick the foods that they need to eat to make them well.
Mm. That's incredible. That is
Mm.
like, that's, I mean, I think every children should have the ability to do that, and to be able
Mm.
to, the fact that they trust the children, that intuition that you have as a human being to heal yourself. That is incredible. That
Mm.
is absolutely incredible. And did you see that with your own children growing up in this way with you? Did you see how healthy and vibrant and
Yes.
alive they were?
But also, I saw the instinct. My kids had instinct for what foods they wanted to eat. And I think I
Mm.
told you this story last time we spoke about went to a picnic in Brisbane when I lived on the Sunshine Coast, met a friend there, went to the markets, had all this really nice quality organic fruit. And Cappy was about 3 or 4 at the time. I thought, Cappy's going to be so stoked. Put the picnic mat out, put all this lovely organic fruit. Where's Cappy? Where's he gone? He was under a Moreton Bay fig tree, which is a native fig tree to Australia. It's not like a jammy
Mm.
Mediterranean fig. It's small, mealy, dry, not very tasty. He was picking them up off the floor, bringing them to me, looking, Mum, make sure there's no insects, and he was eating these small, dry, semi-dried figs on the floor. He
Wow.
knew, and they don't taste very nice to me, but they probably had a lot of calcium in, a lot of other minerals in. And he knew that instinctively. And another thing I noticed with my children, if I'd given them a bunch of grapes, they would often leave just one grape. Or if I gave them a bag of cherries, they would leave one cherry in the bag. And I kind of called it the lone grape syndrome. Whereas me, if someone gave me a bunch of grapes and I'd had enough and there was one left, I'd automatically just eat that. Or if there was a bag of
Yeah.
cherries and oh, I've really had enough, but there's one left, I'll eat it. But it's like
Yeah.
they had an instinctive stop point. They would stop when they'd had enough. And if there was only one grape left, or if there was only one cherry left, it didn't matter. They would
Mm.
stop at that point. And I think because they've been brought up on raw fruit and obviously breast milk at the beginning, that they had this, there was no emotional thing. Oh, we're not, I just think, oh, I might as well eat it. There's only one left. they would always stop when they'd had enough. And I found that very interesting because I hadn't really expected it because I'd been brought up, I suppose, with and the emotional attachment to certain foods. And I know that if I had a bag of grapes and I'd had enough and there was only one or two left, I would just eat them. So I found that
Right.
very interesting. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So much good knowledge here. So much great stuff for for moms and parents to watch and
Mm.
observe in their own children. And if you came across a family who wanted to go into this lifestyle with their children, what do you think is like the number one thing they should do?
I think they should. The important thing is to communicate with your children, even if they're young, and just let them know what you're doing and talk to them about it. And if they have any questions, always answer your children's questions, because, not just because I say so, but this is what we're doing, just answer. So I think have that communication with your children because if your children are on a different diet, it's going to be a change for them. And often we don't like change. So you might be all excited about it, but your children might be like, oh, I don't want to eat this or this. So I think communication with your children and have things that they really like. So if you're taking away something from the diet, bring in something else that they like that's healthy. So maybe make some little treat balls using dried fruit and nuts. You can make fruitarian cakes. You can even make things that are fun, like you can make little kiwi men, cut a bit out for their mouth and put little eyes on them. So we did a lot of
Oh,
fun things, for parties. Like my kids generally ate mono diets of fruit. But if we had a party for other kids that weren't used to like fruit, we'd make a watermelon cake or a fruitarian cake, and we'd have like rocket,
yes.
some skewers with like bits of fruit cut into rocket shapes. So there's lots of fun things you can do for your kids to get them excited about the diet and just make it fun and nice and getting good quality fruit. One thing I noticed when other kids had come to my house and share, they always loved sharing fruit with my kids. I never had one child that wouldn't want to share the fruit. And neighbours and stuff, they'd all, if my children were outside eating fruit, the neighbours would be over wanting to share it because I think children naturally like fruit. But if
Mhm.
you're getting the average supermarket unripe apples or unripe bananas or unripe oranges, they're not very appealing. But if you've got really good grapes or really jammy figs or really delicious persimmon, I've not met one child that doesn't love that. So I think getting good
Mm.
quality fruit, getting to know your local organic suppliers, having little treats, talking to your kids about it, and not rushing them into something they're not quite ready for, doing things gradually, not just doing it overnight. Right, we're going to stop eating this and we're going to eat like all fruit or all vegan. I think that's a bit much. I think doing this gradual thing, adding more and more healthy fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds if you eat nuts and seeds and less processed stuff. And often there's like a match, if they like chocolate biscuits, you can make carob balls or a carob cake. There's like substitutes for things that are healthier. And I think what you'll notice in your children's behavior, because a lot of foods, a lot of additives affect children's brains and their behavior, they can become hyperactive. And when you're giving your children natural food, you'll notice a change. They'll have a lot of energy, but it won't be hyper energy. They could probably walk with you for like 10 miles, but they won't
Totally.
be going for walks. So they have energy. I always think my kids have good energy, but not like hyper energy. And when my kids were young, they'd often have to come with me to meetings, or if I was working at the markets, and they just have to sit for hours, and they would be fine. They'd have, things to play with. They would have a break halfway through, but they didn't weren't off going crazy. They could sit still if they need to. And I think that's the thing. Raw kids have a lot of energy, but if they need to sit still, they can sit still. They're not all going crazy because they've not got all these chemicals going on in their brains, and they affect your brain, they affect children's brains. And it's not really their fault, it's the food they're eating, and they can become like really agitated or really antsy or not able to sit still or not able to concentrate. And I think that's
Yeah.
the thing with children today. There's this inability for many children to concentrate. And when you look at television programs, they change very quickly. They go from this to this to this. And children often aren't given the opportunity to just sit and do something for 20 minutes because their attention span, and I think part of that is cultural, but I think another part of it is dietary as well, that there's this lack of attention because there's all this stuff going on in kids' brains because they're full of chemicals that nobody should be eating, especially not children when their brains are developing. These chemicals are just crazy. And
Yeah.
it's all about profit. They put these chemicals into foods to make them look better when they're absolutely rubbish, to look nice and red or nice and green or to taste better. but they're
Yeah,
not doing anybody any favors. Nobody would say that additives are healthy, but they're there for a reason to put absolute rubbish food to have a semblance of looking okay and a semblance of tasting okay. So yeah, I think it's very important to reduce that, even if you don't go all raw, but to reduce the amount of processed foods that your children have and to reduce, always look at labels and anything that's got any additives in, just it's not a healthy food. If it has to have additives in, it's not. It can't stand alone. It'll go rotten, or
right,
it'll look terrible. So yeah.
right, right. Thank you for that. Thank you for this amazing conversation as always. I just love how juicy that this gets and such good wisdom and knowledge, not just for, adults, but for parents and for children too.
Mhm.
I think a lot of families are going to really, really stick a chord with this and really love what you're saying and can help them kind of. There's a lot of families that want to go into this lifestyle now, so this is a really, really good piece of advice and
Mhm.
information. And I really appreciate your heart and your soul for always sharing your story, always sharing that wisdom so openly. And yeah, I look forward to the day we get to meet in person. I can't wait. I
That
gotta
would be
come visit.
lovely.
I just
Yeah.
I just did an interview with Ted Carr, and he was like, I might be there with Anne. He's like, I might come in the background and say Anne and say hi to her. I was like, oh, I love that you guys are so close that you guys get to meet each other. And so thank you so much
Thank you.
for doing this. And where can people find you? Can they find you on Instagram? Is there a website now that they can? What is the best way?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. Anne Osborne. I think it's Fruit is Butte, I think is my Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I put a lot of stuff on Facebook, so I've got lots of photo albums,
Cool.
articles about fruitarianism, and also health things. So I'm Anne Osborne, Fruit Bat Anne on Facebook. So that's where I post most things. I also got a website that I don't do too much on these days, but it has got some old articles on, which is fruitgod.com. So yeah, and there's also contact details there. So if you want to contact me about anything, you can look on my website and my email address and everything's there. Yeah.
Yay, amazing.